Well, one of the key figures in the AEW All Out Brawl Out backstage fight between CM Punk, Ace Steel, and the Elite is Ace Steel. And Ace Steel has kind of been going under the radar as of late, as he's got his new gig working as an agent in TNA. But as everybody's talking about, Punk to WWE and the Young Bucks and the Elite and that whole beef and what could have been, one voice that's kind of been left out of the mix has been our old friend Ace Steel. We'll know more as Ace Steel has finally surfaced on a podcast that I didn't even know existed, but apparently old Rip Rogers has a podcast. That's no knock on Rip Rogers. I'm sure a lot of people don't know my podcast exists. It's fine. That's not what I'm trying to say here. I'm just saying I'm surprised. It's kind of my job to be aware of this shit, and I have not heard of this before. But Rip Rogers, he's an old Ohio Valley wrestling trainer and a wrestler before that in the 70s, 80s, like a hippie kind of guy. But he has a podcast, and he sat down and he had a conversation, him and some other guy. I don't know who the other guy is. Apparently, just by the way he talks, the other guy was a worker too, but the fact that I don't recognize him must mean he didn't, make it too far in the business. But they sat down and they had a conversation with another guy who didn't make it too far in the business, Mr. Ace Steel. And amongst other things, asking how Kenny Omega tastes, for example, LOL. It was kind of a boring conversation about Ace Steel's whole career, but it was this particular part where they had to ask what the world wants to know. What can you say? What can't you say? What are your thoughts, your words, your opinion, your side of the story? What happened at Brawl Out? Ace Steel, the man who bit Kenny Omega and threw a chair, finally breaks his silence on this, I believe. He has not said anything anywhere before. He doesn't say much here, but of what he can say, he says it. Check out this clip.
Of course, everybody's wanting to know about the AEW, the fight, the firing, how does Kenny Omega taste? Any kind of question you can think of is being asked. So I'm not sure what you're allowed to say or what you can or can't say, but any comments you can make on your run in AEW and how it ended with the backstage brawl, so to speak?
Well, I worked with a lot of great people. Some great, some not so much. Family still exists in this business. There are things none of us can say and none of us will I think actually my wife's the only one could probably tell the story since she was there. And maybe someday. As far as that goes, you don't fuck with family. You just don't. And we came out just fine. And I have a great lawyer, Stephen P. New.
Oh, really?
He's the man. Let's just put that in the world.
Wow.
Stephen P. New is he's a gem. He is for the wrestlers. He's for the boys. He's on the right side of the world. So I will give him all the praise in the world while I'm sitting here smiling. The reason people hate him or whatever is he's not about bullshit. And the guy doesn't take shit. And he doesn't take it lightly. And when you've had enough shit, you either explode or you take care of business yourself. And, and you defend yourself. People don't like him because he defends himself or calls stuff out when it's not proper. But if you treat him right, he treats everyone else right, and that's just not waving his flag. That is because we're friends. And I said this in a promo that we're family and we are family. Family's not always blood. And that's something you find out when you get older, right? You can look at your family, and even though you're blood, that doesn't mean they're the best people in the world. But a lot of the people I surround myself aren't blood that are my family. So, but as far as everything else goes, I'm on the right side of the world right now. So that's about all I can say about that. You might hear something. I'm sure it's a fucking dark side of the ring someday. I laughed at the time going, all this shit's going to be a dark side of the ring someday. Someone's going to want to know.
Okay. Let me try to ask it this way. There was so much shit out there. So many rumors. Is any of the story that you've seen out there, can you say, is it kind of true, mostly true? you've seen so much shit that's not true. Like,
I've seen a lot of shit that's not true, and I've seen a lot of stuff. I can tell you this. Go listen to Jimmy Cornette. Find Jimmy Cornette. Find what Stephen P. New had to say. They somehow, and I'm not saying, and again, I didn't talk to either one of these guys at the time. In fact, Cornette, I mean, they just somehow know. They knew. Someone either told them or they just figured it the fuck out, but it's not hard. How back in Harley's day, I come from a generation, not that I am not a badass, but I come from a generation of you handle things yourself. Again, we were around Harley race. You gentlemen, you go to the same age as me. Hey, let's go handle it. Let's not talk. I won't talk shit on you. I'll talk to you face to face.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, man.
Yeah, so
I just never saw the Stephen P. New swerve come into this, Rip. I don't know about you, but
indeed, you do not fuck with family. I get exactly where he's coming from, and the man just jumped in and did what he felt he had to do in that situation. Now, of course, nobody will ever really know for sure exactly what happened in that moment, as all of those guys do seem like they are pretty much bound to some sort of, hush agreement of some kind. Because even Ace Steel's like, I can't really get into much, but you don't fuck with family. And apparently his wife did not sign a non-disclosure agreement, so she can throw her 2 cents in if she likes. But he did basically say, for those who listen to Jim Cornette or Stephen P. New, you basically get the exact story, that they somehow, some way, wink, wink, seem to know exactly what happened. Well, if you're listening to this, I assume you listen to a lot of Cornette, and you've probably heard Cornette and Brian Last opine on what might have happened, though their perspective may be slightly tilted in Punk's direction, no? But either way, we've heard their opinions, and honestly, I could not isolate any, they talk about it too much to isolate any one story. Stephen P. New, on the other hand, Stephen P. New. I'm sure his content out there on the internet's a lot more slim than Cornette's. So I went out and I searched for him talking about this as a lawyer, and as Ace Steel's self-admitted lawyer in this case, Stephen P. New might have some wise thoughts or outlooks on what exactly did happen at Brawl Out. So to kind of just back Ace Steel's comments about Jim Cornette and Stephen P. New's public comments about the situation is basically exactly what happened, though he can't say it himself. I give you Stephen P. New. Now, this was from a year ago, and I apologize I was not able to catch this a year ago where it probably would have been more relevant, but at least it supports what Ace Steel was talking about here and does kind of give that perspective on what exactly happened at Brawl Out, according to the legal man himself, Stephen P. New.
That ties into where Ace Steel was. So Mrs. Ace Steel and CM Punk and Larry the Dog in CM Punk's dressing room. Mega, Perec, Kenny Omega, the Bucks go down the hall. Things start happening. Cutler, Christopher Daniels run down the hall. Pat Buck and Ace Steel join quickly. And all of them are there at that point. So the initial start, back to your question about is the door kicked in, what's the tenor, what's being said, all of that, I think, is crucial to how this is received. If the Bucks and Omega and Mega Perec walk in the door and go, Punk, we'd like to have a word with you about the scrum, and he stands up and starts, motherfucker, I'm blah, 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 then I think that takes it another, place altogether. But then we know what happens. Someone gets hit with a chair. Someone gets bitten. Mega walks off with the dog. I mean, it turns to a shit show fast. The defense to Ace Steel there is 3-on-1. Well, And if Punk's able to use a level of force equal to 3-on-1, jumping him, Ace Steel's best defense is defense of others. Hey, I was coming to the aid of a friend who was being jumped 3-on-1. And, that really, there's a lot of interesting legal concepts going on here for all of these people involved. But defense of others for Ace Steel just came to my mind, along with something like the Castle Doctrine or Stand Your Ground.
We're going to cosplay. You are CM Punk, Phil Brooks' lawyer.
I think if it's me advising Punk.
Yes.
To quote Cosmo Kramer, giddy up. I say we go after Tony. We air all of this out. We make a jury make credibility determinations on the Young Bucks and Omega. And we put Hangman Page on the stand and Colt Cabana on the stand and Omega Perec on the stand. And we just air all of this dirty laundry out there. Then you actually get to, was this a hostile work environment set up by the vice president of legal affairs and the 3 top senior executive vice presidents?
This was a super fascinating conversation. I had some other sections of it clipped, but honestly, it just wasn't completely relevant to this topic or would have just gone on too long. But he gets into detail about how he would represent CM Punk and what Punk's argument might be in this case if it were to go to court, and how he would represent the Bucks if the Bucks needed to defend themselves in a case if it were to go to court, and that he would be more than happy to jump in and take it all to court and do a deposition with Tony Khan and all of that. But it seems that everybody's just agreed to shut the fuck up about it and move on with their lives. But that seems to be what happened. And it was really, and even Stephen P. New had kind of mentioned that the case would depend on, did the Bucks kick in the door? Did they come in hostily? Did Punk feel like he had to defend himself in that situation? And in turn, Ace Steel having to defend Punk in a 3-on-1 or with his wife in the room? Or did Punk just start swinging as soon as they walked through the door and they had to defend themselves against Punk? That would come out in court. Who was the aggressor, I think, is what it might just boil down to. But in any event, that is the story. And we finally got to hear Ace Steel talk a little bit more about it. I did listen to the full interview with Ace. A little bit boring. But if you do want to know more about Ace Steel, he had a little bit of a run in WWE, had a run in TNA, a run in Ring of Honor. He is a journeyman. The exact definition of a journeyman. He's the trainer of CM Punk. He gets into all of that kind of stuff. And boy, does he sound like Punk, too. They must be from the exact same area. I believe Ace is from Chicago. Boy, does he talk like it. His even just his, I don't know if mannerisms is the right word, but just his tone, the way he talks, and even like the attitude to the way he talks. Like if something's that's fucking stupid, like it's Punk would brashly, just flippantly, without even really giving it a second thought, would just say, and it was fucking stupid. And that was kind of the same kind of way about that Ace Steel carried himself. They're 2 peas in a pod. I can see why they're buddy boys. They sound like the same person to me. But I definitely think, if you're going to go out of your way to listen to anything that I played you here, listen to that full Stephen P. New interview. If you did not get to back in a year ago when it dropped, it didn't seem to make much news. It slipped under my radar, which I should be admonished for because it's my job to catch everything. But alas, I'm only human, and I cannot possibly listen to all 730,000 pro wrestling podcasts that exist. But I do my best. But at least I was able to add it here for context and kind of give the full perspective. So at this point, I think that's where this is going to lay. Now, Steele also kind of joked there that this will probably all be a Dark Side of the Ring episode at some point. Somehow, some way, somewhere over time, this will come up. I think I think this will find a legacy, not quite as remembered as the Montreal Screwjob, but I think this is one that, 20, 30 years from now, it's still going to get mentioned, and it's still going to get speculated on, and it's still going to be talked about in podcasts. It's going to be something that none of these guys are ever going to be able to fully escape from. I think it probably lies somewhere in the middle. The Young Bucks aren't exactly the most aggressive people in the world. Neither is Kenny Omega. So I can't imagine they just kicked in the door and came in all aggressive, like, "Why are you talking shit about us, bro?" But I think maybe, they had a little bit of a tone that Punk didn't like and got punched in the face for it. That's my guess. And then they had to either feel like they had to defend themselves from Punk's attack or retaliate against Punk's attack. Ace Steel was able to observe this with his wife in the room and thought that he needed to get involved, and thus all hell broke loose. And it was a wild melee that will be talked about for years to come. But it was fun to add Ace's context to this and just get his side of the story. I'm sure he's spoken to somebody somewhere since Brawl Out, but you don't really see a lot of Ace Steel on anybody's podcast or doing interviews much or anything. So thought this would be a fun one to share with you guys, but I would love to know your thoughts. Did you watch it? Do you think he sounds and acts, talks like Punk? Two peas in a pod. Whose side are you on? And as time goes on, has it changed? Were you maybe on the side of the Bucks when it initially happened, and now that time's gone on and more information has come out, you are not so sure? Or the other way around, you're on Punk's side and now you're not so sure about Punk. Either way, anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. And just, if you were there, would you bite Kenny Omega? I'd probably bite Kenny Omega. I'd bite his ass cheek. Let me tell you something, brother. You can check out full episodes each and every Sunday right here on this channel, dude. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to take your vitamins and say your prayers, brother.